Stop spending my money. My son said it out loud at my birthday dinner, right in the house I paid half for, yet here I was being treated like a freeloader. A cold splash of water hit my face, not from his hand, but from his wife's half-smile and the snickers around the table. No one took my side. Only the clink of silverware on plates, and my heartbeat pounding like it might burst. I used to think raising a child into a decent man was my greatest achievement. Turns out it was my biggest mistake. I didn't argue or slam the table. I just set my fork down slowly and smiled. That night, I opened the wooden safe and pulled out the old papers, the joint account, the house deed, and the debt ledger he never knew existed. I switched on the little recorder taped under the dining table. Tomorrow morning, the locks would be the same, only the person with the key would change. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. I'm Calvin Mercer, 68, a lifelong Houston, Texas man. Folks still call me the old radio guy, even though my shop hasn't been a radio shop in ages. For 40 years, I soldered wires, fixed boards, and brought back to life electronics other people called trash. I'm not rich, but I'm enough to put a son through college, enough to buy a small place in the suburbs, and enough to bow to no one. I live frugally, not because I'm stingy, but because every dollar I have came from sweat, the whine of a soldering iron, and sleepless nights. When I retired 3 years ago, people figured I got pushed out. No, I chose the timing. I didn't want my life to end with the burnt plastic smell of a fried board, but with the quiet sound of a morning coffee. I paid off every debt, sold the little shop, and gave a portion to Darren, my only son, so he could start up. He said he'd make me proud. For a while, I believed him. Darren went from broke student to a made man with a pool in the yard and heated seats in the car. I used to look at him and feel warm, thinking, my work finally meant something. I didn't know retirement would be the bitterest test of my life, one graded not by love, but by respect. One evening he called, "Dad, come stay with us for a while. Sloan and I are remodeling the place in the Heights. No point wasting money on a hotel." He sounded natural, like I still mattered. I packed in one morning. 2 suitcases, a few old books, my late wife Evelyn's photo box, and a small tin of keepsakes. Our wedding ring, the first receipt from the house I bought in 1985, and a copy of the capital agreement I signed with Darren when he launched the business. I guarded them like my last breath of pride. I arrived on a blazing afternoon. Sloan opened the door with a thin smile. "Hi, Dad," she said without meeting my eyes. I let it go, maybe she was tired. Darren jogged down and patted my shoulder. "Only a few months, Dad. Don't bring too much, living room still a mess." I nodded, a little warmed that he still said Dad. I didn't want to be a burden. From day one, I bought my own groceries and paid my share of the utilities. Every trip to the store, I brought bread, milk, and fruit for the house. I kept my room tidy, washed my dishes, and mopped if I saw a spill. I lived like a careful tenant, not touching what wasn't mine. Still, little by little, I began to feel invisible. Darren was busy, I get that. But the rare meals together were cold as steel. I cooked what he liked, beef, braised in red wine, green beans, mashed potatoes, and he shrugged, "I already ate." Sloan nodded and kept scrolling her phone. I sat alone at the table, hearing the clock tick and feeling my heart dry out like old paint on a wall. Then, "Stop spending my money" dropped like a bomb. It wasn't just an insult, it was a power declaration. I saw it clearly. To my son, I wasn't a father anymore. I was a debt to be liquidated. The table went dead silent, the light glinting off the cold water. In my glass, I looked at Sloan. She smiled slightly, set her glass down, and said, "He's just being honest, Dad. You don't need to be buying things anymore." Then she sliced my birthday cake, placed it on my grandson's plate, like finishing a punishment ritual. No one asked how I felt. No one even looked at me. I sat there in a house with my name on the deed, but no place for me in their hearts. I kept quiet, not from fear, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, anger would burn everything down. I set my fork down, wiped my hands, and smiled. Not forgiveness, leverage. I had power they didn't know about. That night, after they slept, I turned on the desk lamp in my small upstairs room. In the wooden safe, I still had everything: the house co-ownership deed half paid with my savings, the old joint bank account from the business years, and a debt ledger Darren had never seen. He thought everything was in his name. In reality, the law still knew mine. I opened my old laptop and typed the long, unused password. The account came up, still active, money in and out. I scrolled and saw the luxury charges, first-class tickets, a Swiss watch, dinners at high-end restaurants, all from Calvin and Darren LLC. I inhaled. No more hurt, just clarity. I took out a mini recorder and taped it under the dining table right where I'd heard "Stop spending my money." Every sound came through clean. His laugh, Sloane's whisper, my silence. I saved the file and titled it "The Night They Forgot Who Paid the Bills." Tomorrow, I wouldn't make a scene. I'd do what I do best: patience and precision. I'd call the bank to lock down secondary access, then contact attorney Brenda Cole, who handled the sale of my shop back then. Everything would start again, not to build a business, but to reclaim dignity. As dawn slid through the blinds, I sat with a black coffee and listened to traffic wake up on the boulevard. In front of me lay neatly stacked papers and a plan written in slow, measured pen. I looked at the door, sunlight catching the shiny lock, and told myself, this door will stay locked the same way, but this time only one person holds the key. When I was young, I had nothing but hands that worked and a stubborn faith that if I stuck with it, life would make room for me. I opened my first electronics repair shop in 3rd Ward, a loud, working-class slice of Houston. Leaky tin roof, peeling sign, just a flickering neon and a board that read, "Calvin's Repair. We fix everything except broken hearts." That was my wife Evelyn's joke. She believed I could fix anything. In the early years, I worked late into the night. Some nights I slept on a folding chair by the bench, hands greasy and the smell of burnt plastic in the air. I didn't feel poor. I felt like I was building something real, something I could call my own work. I remember dawns when I rolled up the gate, an old radio playing B. King, while sunlight lit up, dust in the air, a simple peace I've never found again. I never chased flash. I drove a 10-year-old Chevy, ate at home, and tracked every expense. If a part ran high one day, I made dinner with eggs and bread instead of eating out. People said I was too frugal, but to me that was discipline. I don't believe in luck. I believe in a plan. I always told myself, don't let anyone else decide the value of your life. When the shop steadied, I put Darren in a private school, even if it meant weekends at the bench to cover tuition. I thought if he had a better shot than I did, every sacrifice would be worth it. Evelyn would say, "You love him like a tradesman, trusting that if you work hard enough, he'll understand." I laughed, but looking back, I was wrong. Some kids raised in plenty never learn the worth of what they have. At 65, I retired. Not for bad health, not because I was forced out. I wanted ease. I wanted to brew coffee on the porch at sunrise without the phone ringing. I closed the shop, sold it to a former apprentice, and gave Darren seed money for his electronics company. I thought, my boy has dreams. I've run my lap. I didn't see that was the first step in handing him the power to decide I was finished. Darren and Sloane bought in the Heights and said I could stay a few months while they fixed the kitchen and bedroom. "Treat it like your home, Dad. I owe you too much," he said. I believed him. So much that I packed in under an hour. 2 suitcases, some old books, my and Evelyn's wedding album, and a small walnut box of documents. I didn't bring much staying with your kid. What more do you need? I remember that morning clearly. Sun blazing, brick walkway shining. Darren opened the door with a smile that faded when he saw the second suitcase. You brought a bit much, he said. I smiled back. Just paperwork, not heavy. I missed the sign. In that house, I wasn't meant to be permanent. I kept to simple living and out of their business. I chipped in for groceries and utilities, though no one asked. Each grocery run I brought bread, milk, fruit, sometimes cookies for the kids. I cleaned my room, washed dishes, did laundry, wiped the counters. I did it because kindness is never a bad idea. I thought if I lived right, they'd see it and value it. Then the coldness crept in, inch by inch. First nods instead of greetings, then dinners with empty chairs. I cooked Darren's favorites, lemon roast chicken, bean soup, peppered beef stew, but he'd pass by, grab a packaged meal from the fridge, nuke it, and say softly, "You don't have to go to the trouble, Dad." Gentle words, sharp edge. I tried to shrug it off, but every time, a sliver of self-respect got pulled out of me. I still remember that dinner, beef stew on the table, me waiting, hoping he'd be home early. The hands crept around the clock, 9 o'clock. Still no car. I ate alone. The meat was cold. The salt from the gravy, mixed with the bitterness in my throat. When I heard the door, I still asked, "Have you eaten?" he said. I ate out and went upstairs. The door clicked soft, but to me it was the latch on a permanent distance. I started asking myself if I expected too much. I wanted to believe he was just busy, that this distance was temporary. But I knew deep down respect never shows up late. If someone sees you as a burden, no amount of patience buys love. Each night I made coffee and sat on the porch, watching streetlights glow on passing cars. I thought about laying every brick and board in my first house with my own hands. Now I sat in a place 10 times nicer and felt like a stranger in someone else's life. Once I asked gently, "Do you still need me to sign anything for the house? You had me put in money at closing." Darren laughed it off. "Oh, that's long done. Just relax, Dad." My heart slowed. He said done, but I knew nothing was done. I still had the co-ownership deed in the box. It's just a sheet of paper, but it's the one thing reminding me I still have standing in this world. I didn't want to fight. I wanted peace. But when you're dismissed long enough, silence stops being patience and turns into a wound. I still house sat when he traveled, watered the plants, took deliveries, cleaned the kitchen. He spoke less and avoided eye contact. Sloane treated me like an obstacle, her polite barbs wrapped in sugar. "You don't need to do anything, we have cleaners," she'd say, with a soft smile and iron eyes. I realized no matter how I tried, they didn't see me as family, just temporary. I slept less, waking to the AC hissing cold, telling myself, just get through this season, he'll change. I was wrong. People don't change because you endure. They change when you stop enduring. I kept my simple routines and logged every expense in a pocket notebook: coffee, bread, gas, some greens, a few dollars toward the gas bill. Each line a quiet proof I wasn't living off anyone. But even sturdy self-respect has limits. Eaten away daily, it becomes a frame with nothing inside. I felt adrift in a house with my name on it. I knew the only thing tying me to this place, the thing Darren hadn't cut, was my signature on the co-ownership, a thin line of ink, but the last string holding me to my dignity. I stared at that paper a long time. The ink had softened, but my name, Calvin Mercer, was clear. I touched it like touching the remains of a working life. The hands that held a soldering iron now just trembled, holding paper. If I let go of this string, I'd lose everything, not just the house, but myself. So I folded it, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, sealed it, and put it back in the safe. Not yet, I told myself. But in my gut, I knew when the time came, I wouldn't stay silent. It started with changes so small you'd call them coincidences unless you've lived long enough to know. Coincidences don't repeat on a schedule. One spring morning, I woke up shivering. The thermostat read 63 degrees Fahrenheit, a setting no one uses even in winter. I bumped it to 72, brewed coffee, and figured Sloan forgot to turn it off. Next day, same thing. Day after, again. I shut the AC off, went to the store, came back, it was running. I lived in a meat locker in the middle of a Houston summer, cold enough that my morning coffee went lukewarm before the first sip. Then, something else. My ivory coffee mug, the one Evelyn gave me in 1992, etched "To my patient man," vanished from the shelf. I searched the kitchen, the cabinets, under the sink, nothing. Sloan smiled. "No idea, maybe you left it somewhere." A week later, I found it on the top shelf where I had to stand on a chair to reach. No explanations. No one owned up. But I understood they wanted me to feel inconvenient. The knives and forks moved too. The second drawer on the thous. Right, my muscle memory was empty. Everything got relocated down low where you have to bend deep to get it. I asked Darren. "You switch things around?" Without looking up, he said, "Just organizing. Organizing or making me feel out of place in a kitchen. I helped tile, then the chair. The old oak chair where I read the paper by the sunny window gone. Darren said, "Borrowed it from my workstation. You can use another." He walked upstairs. I stood in the living room staring at the bright circle of dust where the legs used to be. Strangest thing, I wasn't angry. I just felt hollow, like someone was peeling my life off me piece by piece. That night I turned on the news. 10 minutes later, Darren walked by, grabbed the remote, and flipped to a finance channel. "News gives me a headache," he said, flat. I smiled, stood to head upstairs, and heard him laughing as soon as I closed my door, some loud sitcom with a laugh track. That's when it clicked. He wanted me out of the living room so only his breath owned the space. The few friends he had would visit. I kept it courteous, hello, pour water, step back to my room. Once I heard someone ask, "And he is?" Darren replied, deadpan, "Oh, that's Calvin. He's staying with us for a bit." I heard every word. Not my father. Not my dad. Just Calvin, like a random tenant. I smiled anyway, but something tightened in my chest. People say hurt comes from harsh words. No, it comes from harmless words spoken too lightly. After that, I spoke less. I sat out back with a weathered table and a few cacti I brought. I read, brewed coffee, listened to birds. But stepping into the house felt like crossing into someone else's country. One evening, I found a silver lock on the kitchen cabinet. Above it, a Sharpie note. "After 8 p.m., please don't open. Need to keep things tidy." Short, neat, no apology. I stared at it a long time. Not a rule, a land claim. I tried. The door, it was locked. That cabinet is where I keep my coffee, cookies, and tea I bought myself. Now even a late cup required permission. Nothing to do with saving money, only control. Control by cold, by moving things, by shrinking my living space inch by inch. I didn't blow up, didn't pound the table. Someone who wants you angry wants noise to pull you down. I've lived long enough to know silence is a weapon too. I bought a small brown leather notebook and kept it in the nightstand. Every night I logged everything: time, date, detail. April 6th thermostat set to 63 degrees. April 8th coffee mug moved to top shelf. April 10th chair borrowed. April 12th cabinet locked. Page after page. Those lines were evidence and therapy. Writing reminded me I wasn't crazy. I was being erased from my own frame. I found the pattern. Whenever I tried to fit in, a new boundary went up. I cooked, takeout appeared. I made coffee, they fired up the noisy espresso machine. I sat in the living room, the channel changed. Every move I made got answered with a no. Sloan labeled exclusion as tidy. I need workspace. You should turn in early. Don't worry about the kitchen. Soft voice, hard commands. And Darren, instead of standing in the middle, stayed silent and complicit. One afternoon on the porch, wind hissing through the trees, I realized I hadn't heard my son's voice in days. We were living parallel lives. I was a moving shadow in the hall. He was the owner of the light. That night, I nudged the thermostat up again and wrote, "Check in the morning." At sunrise, I saw 62 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't laugh. I put on a jacket, went downstairs, and made coffee with the kettle. In that bitter cold, the steam rose bitter and sharp like the taste of truth. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me to take myself out. I pressed my palm to the note, after 8 p.m. Don't open, peeled it off, folded it, and tucked it into the notebook. Every move now went in the record pieces of a power game I had no choice but to play. I wasn't planning to lose. That evening, I reviewed the co-ownership papers and reread the clauses. I searched online, underlined what could prove my legal standing. To reclaim my place in this house, I didn't need to shout or beg. I needed to know the rules better than they did. I closed the notebook, set it on the desk, killed the light, and sat in the dark. The cold still seeped under the door, but I wasn't shivering anymore. I'd hit my limit, and when a person hits bottom, what rises isn't fear, it's survival, I told myself. If they want the switch, I'll kill the power at the source. And in the quiet, I knew the real fight had begun. One gray morning, I sat in the small room, light from the window falling across a cold cup of coffee and the notebook where I'd been logging the little details I'd collected over the past few weeks. Every page was proof of calculated coldness. But I didn't write another line. Today I had something else to do, the thing I'd avoided for years. Reopen the old business account. I pulled out my beat-up laptop, its keys polished smooth with time, plugged it in, and waited for it to boot. The words Calvin and Darren Electronics LLC filled the screen, stirring memories. The days father and son worked side by side, argued over parts, then laughed when the first speaker finally ran. But today, those memories weren't pride, they were a reminder of gullibility. I typed the username and password. A flicker of worry passed through me. What if Darren had changed all access? He hadn't. The screen appeared with a short click, and I saw the account still stated clearly. Owners, Calvin Mercer and Darren Mercer. I sat still for a few seconds, listening to the fan hum. Nothing had changed, at least on paper. I scrolled to the cones, transactions. The balance was higher than I expected, but what made my chest tighten wasn't the money, it was how the money was used. First charge, Muffler Pro Auto $4,380. I frowned. That shop specializes in installing sports exhausts. Next, Omega Boutique, Galleria Mall, $7,950. Then the Venetian, Las Vegas, $2,800. Four Seasons, Cancun, $3,200. And the list went on for more than 3 pages. I stopped at a note reading, Maintenance Audi 8, just under nearly $12,000. The car Darren bragged he bought with his own project bonus was actually running on my money, or more precisely, our money, but earned by me and spent by him. I leaned back and stared at the bright screen. In that moment, all Darren's glory, the parties, the trips, the Italian suits evaporated like mist. It was nothing but a luxury bender, fueled by a wallet with 2 names on it. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. What I felt was a cold, steady clarity. I opened statements, downloaded every monthly report, printed each page, and sorted them carefully by month. The smell of ink mixing with cold coffee filled the room with something both bitter and sharp. When I finished printing, I photographed everything, saved it to a USB drive, then uploaded it to cloud storage. I wasn't repeating my old mistake believing that living decently would make justice appear on its own. No. At my age, I understand. If you want respect, you need evidence. I picked up my phone and called the bank. A woman's voice came on, gentle and calm. Hello, Texas National Bank. "How can I help you, Mr. Mercer?" I answered, "I want to verify my co-ownership on the business account under Calvin and Darren Electronics LLC, and I need to make some security adjustments." After a few minutes of verification, she confirmed I was indeed a co-owner. I asked, "If I want to temporarily suspend the other party's access to review transactions, is that possible?" "Yes, sir. We'll send an electronic authorization. One signature from either co-owner is sufficient to temporarily suspend the other's access." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Do it now, please, and send confirmation to my email." When the email arrived, I opened it, signed electronically, and hit send. With one click, I pulled Darren out of access he thought was his alone. When I finished, I sat quietly for a long time. My hands weren't shaking. No more guilt. That vague sense that I was betraying my son dissolved like smoke. I wasn't getting revenge. I was reclaiming control of my own life. I opened auto payments, a long row of charges. Netflix, Hulu, a car rental service, a high-end gym, a golf club membership, even a luxury dog care package I figured was for Sloane's Pomeranian. All of it drafted straight from the company account. I quietly turned them off, one by one. Each time I pressed cancel, I heard a soft ding, like a metronome marking the beat of freedom being restored. This wasn't retaliation, it was putting things back where they belonged. Under credit card link, I saw Darren had attached his personal card to the company account. I unlinked it, changed the password, and added two-factor authentication with codes to my phone. Finally, I called the bank to confirm every change. The representative said, "All set, sir. From now on, you're the only one with granted access." I smiled. "Good. Thank you. And you should know you just helped an old man sleep a little better tonight." I hung up and looked at the bright screen in the silent room. It was strange. I felt no gloating, just a clean, precise feeling as if, after years of enduring, the lines of my life had been put back where they belong. I stepped onto the porch. Houston's rain, it had started. The smell of wet earth drifted into the cold house, washing away some of the stale gloom. I watched drops strike the metal railing and listened to the familiar ticking. It had been a long time since rain felt calming instead of sad. Back in my room, I opened the leather notebook and wrote a simple line. April 24th, locked the account, stopped all secondary payments. For the first time in years, I'm holding the switch. I set the pen down, stared at the page, then added another sentence, a reminder to myself. No retaliation, only reclaim control. That night I went to bed early. The rain fell in a steady hush like an old lullaby. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream about a cold house or the hiss of an air conditioner, just deep, quiet sleep. The next morning I woke early and made coffee in the kitchen with my own kettle, in the mug I'd hidden safely. Sunlight slid through the window, a soft honey gold. I opened the laptop and checked email. There it was from the bank. Access changes completed. The account is now under the sole management of Mr. Graying, Calvin Mercer. Perhaps respect only returns when we dare to lock the door that's been forced open too many times. Which moment in the story made you feel that boundary was finally restored? Tell me a little about it in the comments below. Right below it was a declined transaction. Omega Boutique, $8,240. I didn't need to read further. I knew who was trying to buy what and with whose money. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading across my tongue. Not the bitterness of spite, the bitterness of clarity. I picked up my phone, opened contacts, and found Brenda Cole, the attorney who helped me sell the shop years ago. A woman I trust because she doesn't say much, but she always gets it right. Brenda answered after 3 rings, her voice steady and low as ever. "Mr. Mercer? Long time no hear. What's going on?" I replied evenly. "I need you to review some old papers, the house co-ownership deed and the company account." I think it's time I put everything in order. She paused, then said, I understand. You want to unbind yourself, no problem. I'll schedule a meeting. I smiled. Unbind, such a light word, but to me it meant an entire lifetime. I hung up, opened the notebook, and added a final line for the day. April 25th, called Brenda. Start the legal path. No longer the silent man in my own house. I closed the cover and rested my palm on the leather. Outside, the rain had stopped and the sun was back. Through the window, light flashed on the little silver lock on the kitchen cabinet, the thing that once jabbed my heart but now was just an empty symbol. Because as of today, the person who truly holds the key is back where he belongs. Monday morning, I went to attorney Brenda Cole's office in Midtown. The building was old but clean, the walls washed gold by early sun, scented with coffee and paper, the kind of smell that settles a man. Brenda was already in a small conference room, half-rimmed glasses on, laptop open, and a stack of files I'd emailed the night before. Same as ever, few words, lots of action, no useless questions. Do you still have the original deed? She asked, opening the folder. I have a notarized copy, I said, laying the envelope on the table. She nodded, pulled out the pages and flipped through them with the ease of someone who reads between lines of tiny print every day. After a moment she stopped, tapping the third page. Here, she said, voice firm. Your name is still on title. It states clearly, co-owner 50% interest contributed via capital improvements. In other words, this house isn't solely your son's, and you have legal rights to every brick. I stayed quiet, listening to the soft rustle of paper. I already knew, but hearing someone else confirm it sent a warm current through my chest, not triumph, but acknowledgement that I'm not invisible. Brenda looked up, calm but decisive. First thing I advise is you change every lock and document it. I blinked. You want me to do that right away? As soon as possible, she said. It's not just practical, it's a declaration of possession. As co-owner, changing locks to protect the property is lawful. I'll draft a confirming notice and a list of evidence, photos, video, and the locksmith's invoice. She typed quickly, keys clicking in a steady rhythm. I watched the words build on the screen like a protective fence being set around me. Then she opened the second file. About the company account, I reviewed the statements you sent. Recent transactions are clearly personal spending. You should issue a demand to cease any non-business use. She took a sheet and drafted, to Mr. Darren Mercer, you are required to cease all transactions unrelated to legitimate business operations from the account Calvin and Darren Electronics, LLC, effective upon receipt. She looked up. I'll send the formal letter under my firm's letterhead and CC the bank. You don't need to say anything else. Let the paperwork speak. I nodded. It sounded simple, but it carried a full philosophy. No arguing, no groveling, no grandstanding, just legal, just on time. We moved through the asset list. Brenda asked, anything in the house you purchased or funded as improvements? I paid for most of the flooring, the windows, and the new kitchen, I said. I still have original receipts. Perfect, she said. We'll itemize everything line by line with funding sources. If anyone tries to erase your rights, this proves the house is a shared result, not a gift. She spoke. I took notes. 40 years of work trained me to trust numbers and order, and right then I felt like I was repairing my life not with a screwdriver or soldering iron, but with logic and law. Brenda checked the time and added, slowly, next, you should get the house appraised, not to sell, just to establish the value of your share. I have a trusted broker, Angela Kim. She works fast and discreetly. I'll send her contact. I wrote, call Angela Appraisal. Before we wrapped, Brenda removed her glasses and looked me in the eye. And one more thing, you don't owe neighbors, relatives, or friends any explanations. We'll run a zero communication strategy. Everything belongs in the file, not in other people's mouths. I chuckled softly. I've learned that lesson, Brenda. She nodded. Good. The quieter you are, the less leverage they have. I left the office with a neat stack of documents, each page numbered. The breeze moved through the trees out front, and the smell of coffee from the corner shop filled my lungs warm and clear. I knew that once things are written, stamped, and filed, that silent power game takes a turn. That afternoon I went home. Darren wasn't back yet. Sloane was busy in the yard. I walked through the house, quietly photographing every corner: living room, kitchen, stairs, hardwood floors. Each image saved in a dated folder. I shot a short video of the silver lock on the kitchen cabinet and the note after 8 p.m. Don't open. Still stuck there. I didn't peel it off, I recorded it. Evidence needs the scene intact. I opened the drawer, took out the brown leather notebook and added, April 26th, Brenda confirms co-ownership, draft formal letter, change locks and file report. No direct confrontation. That night, with only the AC humming, I downloaded the bank's access suspension confirmation for Darren and printed it. It felt like the old days, when I soldered a clean joint and the solder pooled in a perfect little bead. Didn't have to be big, just had to be solid. I knew I was moving forward in clear, lawful steps. The next day I called Angela, the broker. Her voice was low and brisk. Mr. Mercer, Brenda filled me in. I can swing by Thursday morning for an inspection. I'll be here, I said. But I want this done quietly. Of course, she said. It's a private appraisal, no listings, no public report. I hung up and checked off another step. The feeling was a mix of nerves and calm. Everything was moving like a machine, each gear catching. No noise, no slippage. That afternoon, Brenda emailed the draft letter to Darren. I read it line by line and signed electronically. Short, cool, not a wasted word. Mr. Calvin Mercer, as co-owner and co-principal of Calvin and Darren Electronics LLC, requires Mr. Darren Mercer to cease all personal expenditures unrelated to legitimate business operations, effective immediately. Any violation after April 27th will be addressed under applicable law. I looked at my signature at the bottom, small but final. No threats, no temper. A letter like that is enough to cost a man sleep. Wednesday night I sat on the porch, street lights washing the steps in yellow. I flipped through my notes from the past weeks. The lock, the mug, the freezing AC. Each small slight that used to sting was now meaningful evidence. I smiled to myself. Not a winner's grin, more the smile of a man who finally knows to use his head instead of his heart. Brenda once said, "In law, timing is everything." She told me to hold steady for 72 hours, the window needed for documents to land with the bank, the broker, and the other side's counsel. After 72 hours, the landscape would shift. I marked in the notebook, deadline, 72 hours, stay silent, prepare evidence. I checked the USB with photos, statements, videos, saved another backup to an external drive. Every detail went in its place. I felt like the electronics tech I used to be, careful, patient, not missing even the thinnest wire. That night I sat alone under a warm lamp. No TV. No more icy blasts from the vents. I'd cut the secondary breaker so the house could finally be quiet. My heartbeat slowed and steadied. Maybe because, for the first time in a long while, I knew I was headed the right way. The next morning I woke early. The breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass from next door. I stood before the mirror and straightened my collar, staring at the silver-haired man looking back. Not a loser, not a victim. A man reclaiming his place. Every step in this plan made no noise, but I knew each small one would add up to a silent shock. And when the moment came, without a single argument, things would line up lawful and fair. I looked out at the porch where the first light slipped through the leaves and told myself softly, "Enough." It's time they learn who really holds the key. And I walked into the day steady, tidy with a certainty I'd lost for years, belief in myself. Thursday morning, Houston was overcast, with a light breeze, and the smell of damp earth still lingering after the previous night's rain. I got up earlier than usual, brewed a pot of black tea, and sat at the kitchen table, quietly watching the first light slip through the oak leaves on the porch. Today was lock change day, the day Brenda calls an act of establishing lawful possession. It sounds like a cold legal term, but to me, it was the first step toward getting my own breath back. The locksmith arrived at exactly 8 a.m. A middle-aged man in a blue shirt with a tool belt nodded politely. "Mr. Mercer, right? I'm here to replace every lock." "That's me," I answered, steady. He opened his bag and laid out his tools like a jeweler. Each click, clack, and snap rang out in the still morning air like the opening bars of a new song. Gate, front door, back door, garage, each lock removed and replaced with a new model using fingerprint security and a keypad. I stood by, watching and photographing every step, just as Brenda instructed. Across the street, the neighbor's camera would surely capture it, all public evidence, no explanation needed. When he finished, I signed the invoice and asked him to note the date, time, location, and the line. The property co-owner authorized this replacement. He looked at me, maybe surprised by the caution, then smiled. "Working with you makes me feel at ease. Maybe I should learn to keep paperwork like that too." I answered softly. "Paper saves you. Words get lost." He left a shiny new ring of keys in my hand, still smelling of machine oil. I held them cold but solid, the cold of newly asserted freedom. Around 10 o'clock I started the next task, the boxes. I opened the closet in Darren's room. Rows of Italian suits, polished leather shoes, watches, cologne, and those achievement gym trophies, everything lined up neat like a showroom. I took each item, wrapped it in brown paper, and packed it into cardboard boxes. No anger, no shaking. I worked like someone clearing a storage unit, not clearing out memories. Each time I sealed a box with tape, I paused and looked around the room, slowly emptied, more light slipping in. I realized Darren's so-called power corner was just a small stage lit by illusion. By noon, I had 7 boxes. I dragged them to the curb, set them by the trees a few steps from the gate, and labeled each lid neatly. "Belongs to Darren Mercer, not for disposal." I knew the neighbor's camera would record this a public, lawful act, not insulting but absolute. Anyone watching would understand. A boundary had just been redrawn. I went back inside, wiped my hands with a damp towel, and returned to the living room. Darren's power corner, leather chair, dark wood desk, oversized TV was next. I took down the personal achievement photo he'd hung, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, then moved the desk to the center of the room. I didn't destroy anything. I just returned the space to neutral. No master, just a room. No notes, no messages. I wanted the door to speak for me. In the afternoon, I opened my laptop and logged into the ISP account. Every entertainment service Darren had linked to my card, Netflix, Prime, Hulu, Spotify, Apple TV, was canceled one by one. A few apps flashed. "Your subscription has ended." I changed the Wi-Fi password and unlinked his devices. With just a few clicks, the house turned truly quiet. No more blaring music, no more videos from the living room at midnight. I could hear the wind pass the window frame, the low hum of the fridge, and the tea boiling in the kettle. Those small sounds, seemingly nothing, made me feel the house was breathing again. Around 2 p.m., an email from Brenda arrived. The subject line was simple: "Notification sent." I opened it. "The formal letter has been sent to Mr. Darren Mercer and his representing office. Contents include notice of changed access to the business account, confirmation of lock replacement on the co-owned property, and a demand to cease personal expenditures. We CC'd the bank, broker Angela Kim, and the notary to establish timing. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. Everything is now on the bright side of the law. I read it again, slowly. No flowery words, no comfort. But it was enough. I felt lighter. I didn't need to chase approval anymore. With paperwork and a signature, I had a lawful place in my own home. I closed the laptop, poured more tea, and sat at the kitchen table. Afternoon sun slanted through the glass and laid a light gold wash across the surface. For the first time in months, I heard my heartbeat at a normal pace, not fast, not trembling, not rushed. I stood and walked the house. The front door was shut tight, the new lock gleaming. The back door, the garage door secure. I tested a key once, turned it gently. The soft click landed sure, like a confirmation. This part is yours now. Back in the study, I opened the safe. Inside was everything: the deed copy, attorney letters, bank statements, a USB with photos and videos, and the brown leather notebook I'd been writing in for weeks. I sealed it all in plastic sleeves, labeled each with the date, and locked it away. The metal thud was a low note, the sound of order. When everything was done, I sat down with my warm tea. The house was still, only the wall clock ticking. Outside, the sun slipped behind the trees. I knew it wouldn't be long before that familiar engine roar pulled up outside. I had pictured it, Darren arriving, jamming the old key, twisting and twisting, then pounding the door, calling my name in a mix of surprise and fury. Maybe he'd call Sloan, maybe he'd shout. But this time, I didn't need to say a word. I'd prepared it all: report, invoice, confirmation letters, and a silence with weight. I drew a long breath. The air in the house held the scent of tea, wood, and something else, quiet. Not the quiet of fear or tolerance, but the quiet that comes when order returns. Outside, the sky deepened to purple. The streetlights came on, casting a soft glow across the table. I took the last sip of tea, set down the cup, and murmured, "If there's going to be roaring tonight, let the house answer for me." I stood, walked through each room, checked the locks, and turned off extra lights. On the stairs, my shadow fell long across the wood, old but steady. My mind no longer spun around the fear of being erased, only the certainty of a man who knows the door is finally opening toward him. A little before 8 p.m., I heard the familiar engine from a distance, the long hiss of the sports exhaust. Darren once bragged was one of a kind in Houston. Closer and closer. That sound slapped the quiet street like a challenge. I didn't get up. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the brown leather notebook still open. The warm lamp lit the surface enough to catch each bead of condensation on the glass. Tires crunched on gravel, then a hard break at the gate. A rapid clatter followed the old key jammed into the lock, twisted again and again. Clack, clack, clack. But no click answered. Then the pounding 3 hits at first, then 5, then a furious drum. "Dad, open the door." Darren's voice cracked, stripped of calm. I stayed still, my palm resting lightly on the cool glass. Outside, he kept shouting, "You have no right to do this. This is my house. You're just staying here, do you understand?" I heard every word, clearly enough to picture his face flushed, eyes wide, tendons up on his neck, just like when he was a kid throwing a fit because I wouldn't buy a toy. Only now he wasn't a child. He was a man drunk on power. More pounding. Then Sloane's voice, high, sharp, cutting through the night breeze. "Mr. Mercer, you're breaking the law. Open up now. We're calling the police." I remained silent. The door didn't answer, but the silence had teeth, the thing Brenda calls the silence with teeth. Silence can bite. It unravels a person faster than any words. I heard Darren run around back, try the garage, then slam into the side gate. Metal rang dry against the night. A moment later, Sloane shouted, "What do you think you're doing? Keeping us outside like prisoners?" I smiled faintly. They didn't understand this wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Each new lock didn't confine their freedom. It locked away the years I'd been treated like a shadow. Footsteps circled the house, then went quiet. I knew they were checking windows and side doors. But I'd planned it all. New locks, interior bolts, heavy curtains, no opening anywhere, not even a crack. I still didn't move, my hand resting on the table. Beside it, Brenda's gray folder lay ready. Title deed, bank statement, proof of ownership. If the police actually came, I'd open that folder and everything would be explained by signatures and seals, no words needed. Outside, Darren's voice came again, hoarse with rage. "You think you're smart? I'll sue. I'll take it all back. You hear me, old man?" A gust hit, rippling the curtain. Darren's voice stretched thin in the wind. Then I heard the thud of fists on a steering wheel, the engine roaring, and finally, the familiar squeal of tires. The car tore off, leaving a silence so deep I could hear my heartbeat. I sat a few more minutes without moving. When the headlights outside were fully gone, I stood, refilled my water, and drew a long breath. Not a sigh of relief, just the knowledge that the first confrontation had passed without a single word. The neighborhood settled again. I stepped onto the porch and glanced at the house next door. The old man on his wooden chair nodded, quiet, as if he'd heard and understood everything without asking. I gave a small smile and closed the door. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Brenda. "Stay silent. Don't respond. Don't open the door. Don't say a word. Make them right first." I typed 2 words back. "Understood." I turned off the main lights, leaving the kitchen lamp a small, warm pool. I brewed a fresh pot of tea. The black tea scent drifted through the room. That night I ate a slice of bread with honey and went to bed early. For the first time in weeks, I slept straight through, no cold, no curling up, no jolting awake to the hiss of the AC. Only the wind on the porch and the house's steady breath, a breath that, I knew, had returned to its rightful owner. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window, pale and gentle like a thin blanket. I stepped onto the porch. The gate stood firm, the lock gleamed. Everything held, no trace of the night before except a few tire marks on the street. I sipped coffee and listened to sparrows chattering under the eaves across the way. Peace had returned, but I knew the next undertow was forming. Late morning, the doorbell rang. Not Darren, not Sloane, the mail carrier. I signed and opened an envelope bearing the name of the law office representing Darren Mercer. Inside were 3 pages. The first line made me chuckle, even as my chest tightened. "Mr. Calvin Mercer, due to unstable psychological behavior and unlawful control of assets, our client demands restoration of property management and the company account and that you cease exploiting your legal position to cause further loss." Unstable. Exploiting. Words like a sweet stab, not deep enough to bleed, but enough to make the heart clench. I read the letter to the end, folded it, and set it aside. No anger, no sadness. If anything, I saw more clearly. They were starting to lose. I scanned the letter to Brenda with a note, "Received, awaiting guidance." 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Brenda's voice was calm, almost cool. "Let me handle it. Don't respond at all. I'll send a reply today." That afternoon, I received the copy. Just 3 sentences, exactly her style. "We reject all allegations. Mr. Mercer is fully competent and has clear proof of ownership. Any disputes, if any, will be resolved with financial and notarized evidence." No extra lines, no put-downs, just 3 sentences short, clean, and with teeth. I printed it, read it again, and filed it. In those spare, cold lines I felt the strongest protection of my life. Not someone speaking for me, but documents, signatures, and truth speaking on their own. That evening I sat on the porch, a cool breeze running through a street lit in warm gold. Far off, kids laughed. A car rolled out of a garage. A dog barked once. Everything back to ordinary. No one knew that inside this house, a battle had just ended with 3 sentences. I leaned back and looked up. I no longer needed anyone to understand me. I'd talked too much for a lifetime. Now I let silence speak, the kind of silence that isn't fear, but the quiet of a man who knows. He's holding the scales again. Before bed, I wrote in the notebook. April 28th, they pounded, they shouted, they slandered. In the end, I only needed silence. And silence won. I closed the notebook and blew out the light. Outside, Houston whispered in the night wind, and inside this house sat one old man in the quiet. But this quiet now has teeth, claws, and knows how to protect itself. It took exactly 3 days after the door-pounding night for the neighborhood to start buzzing. Houston doesn't get much snow, but rumors always fall thick as misty rain. That morning, while I was watering the plants on the porch, the neighbor across the street, Marjorie, the one who always wears big sunglasses and loves to gossip, came over and asked in a low voice, "Mr. Mercer," I heard, "you tossed your son's stuff out to the curb?" I looked up and smiled faintly. "You can see it. What belongs to someone should go back to that someone. I just returned everything to where it should be." She shrugged, started to say something, then stopped. I knew by this afternoon the whole block would know the story in a dozen versions, but I didn't care. After years of silence, letting people think whatever they want turned out to be a kind of freedom. The rumor spread fast. Some said I'd lost my mind. Others said old man Mercer is sharp as a tack, playing it like a pro. Across the street, the guys who gathered to watch games murmured, "Darren's done, credit cut off, car not paid off yet." I caught bits of those lines as I passed the corner grocery and just smiled. Darren's world, the flashy circle he proudly showed off to friends, started to crack. The weekend cocktail parties stopped. That high-class crowd he used to court went quiet. Invitations to watch the game, attend openings, and hit social mixers thinned out. Once my secondary card got cut, the auto pays for the golf club, the fitness club, and a few luxury apps all dropped. The neon-lit world around Darren went dark, bulb by bulb. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I knew it was him. A text popped up. "Dad, let me talk to you one last time." I read it but didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I'd said everything I needed to say with actions. What I needed to keep wasn't words. It was boundaries. I turned off the screen, set the phone on the table, and made coffee. A hot black coffee, no sugar, no cream, the aroma so strong it felt like it could carry the heaviest thoughts for me. I took it to Herman Park, where I go whenever I need to find my balance. Morning sun wasn't harsh yet, laying a silvery sheen across the lake. Kids pedaled swan boats, seniors practiced Tai Chi, and a few students strummed guitars near the monument. I stood still, listening to the wind slip through the trees, smelling fresh-cut grass blending with the coffee. No one knew who I was. No one asked questions, and that felt good. I sat on a stone bench, watching light ripples on the water. I thought of Evelyn, my wife. If she were still here, she'd sit right beside me, paper in hand, and ask, "Thinking too much again, Calvin?" I'd smile and say, "No, I'm just fixing the final circuit in my life." When I got home, I opened the closet and pulled out the old picture frames. Since Evelyn passed, I'd packed every family photo away because I couldn't stand to look, but today I wanted them all back up. One by one, me and her in Galveston in 1989, Darren grinning at 4 years old in the yard, and the whole family at our first Christmas after I opened the shop. I wiped the frames, swapped the glass, and hung them in the hallway along the path from the front door to the kitchen. Afternoon light poured through the window and washed over those faces, shimmering as if the past were smiling again. I went back to the desk and grabbed my tools. My father's old wooden desk, the one I'd used for decades, had a chipped corner. I took glue and clamps and carefully fixed it. My hands were still steady, even if my knuckles clicked softly. When the crack pressed tight, I watched the wood dry under the lamp. The smell of glue, wood, and tea blended together into a feeling I hadn't found in this house for years. For the first time, I didn't hear high heels, the TV, or criticism. Just peace flowing from the kitchen to the living room, from the stairs to the second floor. That night, I sat under warm light and looked at a house that was clean, orderly, and empty enough. I realized the person I needed to defeat wasn't Darren. He was a product of a world I'd unintentionally enabled, one that valued status over gratitude, surface over roots. What I truly needed to overcome was the compliant version of myself, the man who stayed silent too long, believing sacrifice solves every conflict. I added water to my glass and took a small sip. In that moment, I felt I'd just walked out of a long war, not with a glorious victory, but with clarity. I opened the brown leather notebook and wrote, "May 3rd, the house is quiet. The noise outside is fading, and inside it's silent but warm. The real win is when there's nothing left to prove." I closed the notebook, opened my laptop, and skimmed an email from broker Angela Kim. "Mr. Mercer, I've found 3 suitable condos. If you still aim to sell quickly, we can start next week." I sat and thought. The idea of selling this house used to gnaw at me. But now, I felt different, not because I wanted to run, but because I wanted to choose a new place with my own hands, not someone else's. I typed back, "Angela, I want to see all 3. Schedule me for Monday morning." Night fell fast in Houston. I went to the porch, turned on the warm light, and listened to crickets rise from the grass. The window reflected my silhouette on the wall, an older man, a bit stooped, but with bright eyes. I thought about Darren, no longer angry, just regretful. Regret for a son who forgot a person's worth isn't on a credit card. It's in how he holds on to the word humane. But I knew life would teach him that lesson, not through a father, but through time. I sat still, listening to wind move through the trees. Slowly, a thought took shape. Victory, if it's truly victory, is never loud. I smiled. The porch light glinted in my empty teacup, sparkling like the eyes of a father who'd finished a long journey, a journey that doesn't require anyone to apologize, only that he stop, stand straight, and move on. One morning in May, I swung by the Kroger near home for a few basics: milk, coffee, tea bags, and some cookies. Everything was so ordinary I barely noticed until I reached the express checkout. In the other line, Darren stood there, wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes, a few items in his hands: a bottle of liquor, a box of instant noodles, a pack of cold cuts. He saw me first. His eyes flicked, then steadied, trying to hold calm. The moment was brief, but it was enough to bring it all back: the pounding on the door, the cold dinners. I set my items on the belt, the scanner beeping steadily like a calm heartbeat. Darren said nothing, just stood still, waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. I paid, signed, and thanked the cashier. Then I picked up my bag, walked past him, not hurried, not bowed, not even with a glance. No nod, no sigh. I heard a soft voice behind me. "Dad." But I kept walking, my shoes whispering across the polished floor. The automatic doors opened. Warm air hit my face. I stepped out and let the scanner's final beep fall behind me. Sitting in the car, I studied my face in the rearview mirror. No big emotion, just quiet. I wasn't angry with Darren anymore, but I didn't feel the need to forgive either. Forgiveness is a kind of debt, and I don't want to borrow again. Some things you just let go. You don't have to erase them. On the way home, the light turned yellow. I stopped and watched people crossing, each carrying a story. And I thought, Life is nothing like the movies. Endings don't always happen at some romantic sunset, but on an ordinary Tuesday morning, at an express checkout between two people who once shared a roof. After that day, Darren and I slipped into separate orbits. No calls, no texts, no showing up. I didn't try to reconnect either. The bond between a father and a son, seemingly unbreakable, can wear thin rather than snap thinning until neither can feel it's still there. I returned to my own rhythm. Each day, I found joy in small things, dusting the bookshelves, swapping in warm bulbs, buying more plants. I repainted the living room in a warm beige Evelyn's favorite. When it dried, the room seemed bigger, airier, and something inside my chest felt lighter. I planted a row of bougainvillea by the porch. Beside them, a few small cacti, spiky but blooming bright. Looking at them, I thought of my life, sometimes dry, sometimes broken, yet still able to bloom into something soft and resilient. Whenever I watered them, droplets landed on the leaves and caught the sun, scattering into tiny points of light. I realized you don't need an audience for shimmering moments to exist. Some are meant just for you. I reorganized my work corner and reset my father's old desk. Each brushstroke, each fix was a way to reclaim mental territory, the invisible ground in me that had been occupied by fear, silence, and the illusion that family means enduring. Now, when I lay a hand on the smooth surface and hear the wood's low note under my palm, I know I'm coming back to life, piece by piece. I don't need to beat anyone. I just need to stop losing to myself. I learned to accept losing an illusion, not losing a child. Darren is still out there, still my blood. But between father and son is a space I no longer try to fill. Sometimes, clinging to someone who isn't ready is the fastest way to lose yourself. One afternoon, as I read the paper on the porch, a stray cat wandered into the yard. Ash-gray fur, a small scar over one eye, thin but walking with confidence. It came without a sound and sat at the step like it had known me forever. I opened the cabinet, poured a little milk into a dish, and set it near. It glanced over, then moved in and drank, slow and steady. I said quietly, "Welcome, new friend." It stayed after that. I named it Diesel, because the low purr in its throat sounded like a truck engine idling smooth at startup. Diesel didn't ask for anything, didn't need petting, just hovered near me, napping by the chair or trailing me to the porch when I read. One rainy day, it curled under the table, tail wrapped around my calf. I looked down and saw it sleeping and couldn't help but laugh. Maybe life knows how to compensate. It takes the noise and returns peace. It takes those who don't value you and sends back a small creature that's silent and loyal. That evening, I sat on the porch with Diesel beside me while the city lights rose in the distance. The glow spread like Houston's long exhale after a tired day. I sipped tea and listened to wind in the trees and cars fading down the road. In that moment, I felt completely eased. No more anger, no more regret, no more longing to explain. Some people pass through your life to teach you one thing. Timely indifference is the height of self-respect. I wrote in the notebook. May 9th ran into Darren at the supermarket. No need to speak. It's done. I didn't win, and I didn't lose. I simply got free. I closed the notebook, blew across the steaming tea, and watched Diesel stretch in the lamplight. Life, in the end, goes on, not loud, not dramatic, just the steady breathing of a city and a man who finally learned how to live with himself. A month after that chance encounter at the store, my life slipped into a very different orbit. No more upheavals, just a slow, steady rhythm. I call this phase the discipline of peace. In the mornings, I still get up early, brew a pot of black tea, and open the notebook to review expenses. I started noticing what I'd forgotten for years. Quiet can be measured by the bill. When Darren and Sloan were here, utilities were always double. The TV ran all day, the AC at full blast, the porch lights on all night. Now it's just me. Each month the bill is down by nearly half. No more showers left running, no more lights blazing when no one's in the room. The numbers tightened, just like my house now. I reset the budget, carefully, like the electronics tech I used to be. In the notebook, I split it into 3 columns: health fund, medication, checkups, and emergency care; retirement fund, daily living and basics; go somewhere in the fall fund, a line I wrote in red ink like a promise to myself. Maybe a trip to New Mexico, or just driving the Galveston coast, watching waves and eating crab cakes. I don't need luxury, I just need to go, not run. Brenda emailed good news. The paperwork is complete. You are established as having full usage rights to the home, and both selling and purchasing new property are lawful. The asset plan has been updated with the Harris County Notary Office. I read carefully, then saved the PDF. Brenda's letters are always short, but their effect lasts. That afternoon, I printed the files, slipped them into plastic sleeves, and put them in the safe. The soft, low clink of metal was reassuring. I murmured to myself, "That's done. No one can take this house from me now. And no one can threaten me with lines like, 'You're just staying here.' Every brick and every square foot of quiet bears my name now, Calvin Mercer, no one else." I let myself learn things I never had time for when I was young. One weekend morning, I signed up for a beginner's art class in Midtown. Small room, the smell of oil paint, the whisper of brushes. I was the oldest in the class, and no one cared. The teacher, Harper, wore her hair in a bun and had a kind smile. She saw my hand shake around the brush and said, "It's all right, Mr. Mercer. A little shake is a good sign. It means your heart still wants to tell a story." I laughed at that. At first, my lines were childlike and crooked, but the more I painted, the softer I felt. I kept choosing warm tones, earthy yellows, olive greens, brick reds. I realized that when a life is more than half lived, you don't need loud colors, you just need enough light to see yourself clearly. Old friends started drifting back. A few of the guys from the trade heard I'd retired and even took my house back from my son, so they came by. I poured tea, we talked and laughed, but I didn't open the door too wide. I knew most came from curiosity, not care. And I learned that loyalty only matters when it's dark. I wrote that line down in my notebook, a bit of homemade philosophy after 70 years. Sometimes Darren still writes an email here and there, sometimes long, sometimes just a few lines. "Dad, can we talk again?" Or, "I know I messed up, but I'm struggling." I read them and forwarded them straight to Brenda. No replies, no explanations, no scolding. I chose zero dialogue. Not out of cruelty, but because I understand. Sometimes silence is the only medicine strong enough to treat dependency. Brenda says, "I'm handling it right." Silence, she said, is a risk management tool. Every extra word you say can be used against you in court. Let silence work, I joked. So for the first time in my life, getting old is what makes me dangerous. She said, "No, it makes you someone who knows how to choose the space to live in." My new life is simple, but orderly. Each morning I water the plants with diesel trailing me like a shadow. Each afternoon I read a few pages, listened to old radio, sometimes walk the park. I've started eating well again, not fancy, just because I feel worthy of the small things. One evening I treated myself to a budget steak at a little place near the museum district. The place wasn't crowded. The smell of grilled meat was rich. I ordered medium and ate slowly, sipping a cheap but warm red wine. On the way home, I stopped at an indie theater for a small film. No big names, no effects, just real faces and spare lines. It was about an old man cleaning his house after his wife died, discovering that happiness isn't in finding the past, but in setting a glass in the right spot on the table. I sat quietly in the dark, feeling like the film was made for me. That night, Back home on the porch, a breeze moved through the bougainvillea. Diesel curled at my feet and gave a low purr as if to say, "We're good now." I smiled, leaned back, and looked at the few stars over Houston. I realized my idea of luxury had changed. Not material or money. Luxury now is sleeping through the night without dreaming of pounding on the door. It's opening my eyes in the morning without staying on guard. It's locking the house without locking my heart. I wrote, with a steadier hand than before. The discipline of peace, don't avoid noise. Choose what's worth hearing. Freedom begins when you no longer have to be on defense. I set the pen down, poured more tea, and smiled. Tonight, like most nights lately, I know I'll sleep deep. No cold, no knocking, just the house's steady breath, and a man who finally learned to live for himself. Time moved on, quiet as a river that doesn't need anyone to stir it. One June morning, while I was making coffee, my phone rang. A text came from my cousin in Dallas, someone who rarely reaches out. "Calvin, no matter what, he's still your son. Blood doesn't run dry." I looked at the words, took a sip of black coffee, then typed slowly. "If there's no blood, respect. Even blood runs dry. I'm not cutting him off. I'm just done bleeding." I sent it, turned off the phone, and didn't wait for a reply. Because I understand that people on the outside always see reconciliation as an obligation, not a choice. But they don't live in houses where your voice gets taken, and they don't know what it's like to be called an ungrateful old man on your own birthday. A week later, someone knocked. It was Raymond, one of Darren's old friends, who'd been to my house a few times back then. He stood awkwardly at the gate, hat in hand, voice hesitant. "Mr. Mercer, I just wanted to say, Darren's sorry. He says he wants to meet you once and talk properly." I looked at him and saw the embarrassment in his eyes. I said gently, "Raymond, some things don't need to be proper. They just need to be over. And they are." He nodded, as if he understood, then stepped back. I closed the gate. The evening wind blew through, carrying the smell of fresh paint and dust, the smell of a house that truly belonged to me. That afternoon, I took old photos out of a drawer, not of Darren but of my own childhood, me at 8, standing in front of my father's workshop, holding a hammer twice the size of my arm, and my mother cooking in a tin-roof kitchen, sweat on her forehead but a smile in her eyes. I hung those photos along the hallway wall, facing the family pictures I'd already arranged. When I hammered in the last nail, I stepped back. 3 generations on one wall, my past, needing no one's approval. I no longer want to tell the story of father and son at odds. Now I'm telling the story of an old man learning to define himself again. On Sunday, I stopped by the local church, not for repentance, but because I like the organ filling the high space, steady like a heartbeat. The new pastor is young, with a soft, low voice. After the service, people gathered outside, eating waffle cookies, drinking black coffee, and chatting about the weather, flowers blooming, and gas prices. No one asked me, "Who do you live with?" And no one stared with pity. Just simple greetings. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. Is the coffee strong enough today?" I smiled. As strong as I need. Sometimes life only needs that much a conversation that doesn't touch the wound. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch with Diesel stretched out beside me. I thought of all the movies and books that end with reconciliation, father and son hugging, tears falling, music swelling. Real life doesn't have a finale like that. I don't need a scene where Darren kneels to apologize, and I don't need to hear, "I understand now." Because I know an apology can't erase the structure of abuse, something built over years of layered contempt, not in 1 minute of remorse. I'm no longer angry, but I choose not to re-enter. Some doors, once closed, aren't for punishment, they're for protection. In the days after, I kept refreshing my home. I repainted the facade in terracotta, a warm red-orange, like the old Tuscan brick Evelyn loved in magazines. It made the house stand out in a block full of cold grays, like an older person who knows exactly who he is in a noisy crowd. I swapped the porch lights for hand-forged iron fixtures with amber light, casting soft patterns on the wall. At night, the house glowed just enough, no showing off, no chill. I stood at the gate and looked in, feeling calm the way grass feels after rain. Inside, Diesel napped on a gray upholstered armchair, belly rising and falling, sometimes letting out a little grr in his sleep. I whispered, "Now this is a home, Diesel." He didn't answer, just tucked his legs and kept sleeping. Sometimes I ran into people who once laughed along with Darren, people who sat at that birthday dinner when the water was thrown and no one stood up. Now I see them at the grocery store, outside the church, or at the park. They nod and give tight smiles, eyes unsure, afraid to brush the past. I don't mind. I answer with a light smile. No blame, no reminders. My silence has already finished its lesson. The neighborhood drifted back to smaller things, new fences, kids' birthday parties, who won the lottery, who's moving out. The story of Mr. Mercer and the rude son faded like kitchen smoke. I got my place back not as a victim, not as a pitiful old man, but simply as Calvin, the man who lives alone, tends plants, and always takes the trash out on time. That night, I sat in my study and opened the brown leather notebook. The desk lamp fell across my shaky but clear handwriting. I wrote the final lines of my own story. I owe the past no more words. I don't need to prove. I don't need to be understood. I just need to live each day fully with a lit house and a cat that knows how to be still. I set down the pen and listened to the clock tick. Outside, the Houston night was warm and quiet. A few neighbors' lights had gone out, leaving the terracotta glow on my porch, gentle as my own breathing. I whispered, almost like a prayer. There is no ending. There's only the present, and it's enough. I turned off the light. Diesel shifted and rested his head on my leg. In that house, every question had been answered by quiet. Summer comes early in Houston, sunny like honey, the air carrying dry earth and fresh grass. Every morning I still sit on the porch with a cup of black tea in hand, Diesel lazy at my feet. After all the sharp turns, my life finally reached a straight stretch. I started doing what everyone should at my age, putting things in order so no one has to do it for me. One morning I went to attorney Brenda Cole's office. She greeted me with a kind smile and asked, "What would you like to update in your will?" I said, "Everything, but keep it simple." I decided to move all remaining assets, the house, part of my retirement, and my savings into a vocational scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth. I told Brenda, I was a kid who learned radio repair in night classes. If my old teacher hadn't believed in me, I wouldn't have become anything. Now I want to pass that belief on. Brenda looked at me and nodded. A tidy, generous legacy. She printed the new draft. I signed it, and we placed it in a deep blue folder, the color of things finished without fanfare. I also finalized options for the house. Either I'll sell and buy a smaller place in Midtown close to my art class, the park, and my favorite coffee shop, or, if I'm up to it, I'll keep this house and rent part of it so there's some company and extra income. I don't see it as backing down, but as deliberate movement like an electronics tech, rebalancing a circuit, cutting excess current so the system runs steady. I sketched a floor plan, marked each area, and noted repairs. Old plumbing, a porch roof to replace, railings that needed paint. I called contractors, booked dates, and within 2 weeks, the house felt like new skin. When the workers came in the afternoons, I chose a pale green for the porch roof so the shade it cast would feel cool. Diesel loved it, sprawled there all day, eyes half closed, tail flicking like approval. I set up regular medical care, something men often avoid. But not me. I made appointments for a heart check, blood work, and a hearing test. Each slip got clipped neatly into the notebook. I also joined an early morning walking group in Midtown. On my first day, I was the oldest there, but after a few sessions, I blended in. We talk about small things, waking up early, which coffee tastes best, how surprise weather flares up knee pain. No one asks, "Where are your kids?" No one needs to know my past. We just share an even pace and quiet breath. When Brenda finished the will paperwork, I sent a small gift basket to her office, a few teas, a jar of honey, and a handwritten card. I wrote, "Thank you for helping me keep not only my house, but my dignity. In your line of work, I think you know the value of quiet better than anyone." Brenda called back, laughing on the phone. "Mr. Mercer, I only handled the legal part. The rest you're calm, that's the real win." I knew she was right. Paper is just a frame. Dignity is the inside that no one can sign for you. A few days later, another text from Darren. Short. "Dad, can we talk one last time?" I looked at the screen and felt no bitterness. I read it, set the phone down. No reply, no anger, no satisfaction. Just enough. I don't need a performance of "I'm sorry," because now I know real forgiveness isn't in words, it's in the right to not listen anymore. I chose that right, calmly. That afternoon, I stood on the porch watching the bougainvillea in the breeze. The new porch roof cast shade across the steps, and Diesel rubbed his head against my leg. I could smell freedom, not flowers or tea, but the air when you're no longer afraid of someone knocking. I thought about the road I'd traveled. From a man pushed out of his own home, I learned to use silence as a shield, then turned silence into the foundation of peace. I suddenly understood that victory isn't kicking someone out, it's stepping out of their shadow. I looked at the front door, the new paint still fragrant. I laid my hand on the lock, cold but solid, and said softly, "This door is locked, but it's to open another door for me. Thank you for staying with me to the end." If you're still here, listening to these last lines, maybe you also know what it feels like to stand up from something you didn't cause. I know it isn't easy to stay calm, and it isn't easy to be quiet without losing your self-respect. I'm telling this story not for pity, but to remind us that anyone, at any age, has the right to be respected and the right to choose peace. Now, I want to ask, where are you watching from in the world? Is there anything in this journey that makes you feel closer to yourself? Leave a comment and share your thoughts about boundaries, respect, and how you learn to forgive without losing yourself. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Not to support me, but so we can keep alive the stories of dignity, kindness, and the quiet strength of growing old.